and welcome along to the Crystal Conversation. This is both a podcast and also a YouTube coverage in which we are thrilled beyond the thrilling to have the opportunity transatlantically to speak with Samaya Aster, who is the director of Crystalis Institute and has brought so much through her work that supports us in the times that we are living in. And for me personally, just to see Samaya for me, it takes me to a place of deep peace and boundless joy, because that is in turn what I found in experiencing her work. So Naisha, welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. It's so nice to reconnect with you. And yeah, just for clarity for our viewers, so I was Naisha Azian. That's what I wrote the Book of Stones under in the Crystal Ally cards. And then about a year and a half ago, I changed my name to Samaya Aster. So I get that question all the time. Who are you? Where's Naisha? She's in here with Samaya. So yeah, it's great to be with you. It's great to see you again. And thank you so much for asking me on.
I'm just thrilled that you've been able to step forward in this time and of these times to be able to connect with us. And maybe, I guess, if I could start by just asking you, in relation to these times, do you have any thoughts or considerations or awarenesses of where the crystals and your work is of relevance at the moment?
Yeah, so let me get a toehold on that one, because there are so many different facets of what's going on right now. I think I want to start on the macro level. So the macro level is the earth itself shifting. And, you know, part of that is climate change. And I'm not talking about human-driven climate change, which is just, you know, a nominal fraction. I'm talking about the earth itself going through a regular cycle that it normally goes through, which we just happen to be on the planet for. And this is in conjunction with the sun, which is the largest light source that we have. So when we're talking about working with light, when we're talking about working with electromagnetic energy, we have to take into consideration the two major generators of that, which are the sun and the earth. And these two bodies are going through this point right now in their regular evolution and their regular change cycles that are forcing us into an accelerated growth state. And, you know, this is part of our evolution as I call us, cells within the body of Gaia. You know, we don't live on the earth, we live in the earth. We are part of the system. And I think that part of the problem that we're seeing on the planet is that we've forgotten that. We don't think that we are part of the body of Earth. We think that somehow we are foreign agents or different from. And getting back to connection with the earth is particularly important right now, simply because, well, I guess it's not simple, but the earth's energy field drives our biology. That is what we have evolved around for millions of years. And when we're disconnected from the earth, we lose those signals and we lose our way. It's just like a migrating animal who loses the magnetic field and can't find its way. It's exactly like that, in fact. So when we are disconnected from the earth, we lose our way. And that is figurative, of course, but if we look at it on a literal level, what it means is that we cannot receive and process the signals that the earth is sending to us. And so we become like cancerous cells in the body. We go rogue and we start just gobbling up resources and, you know, eventually kill the body. Of course, that's not the direction we want to go in. So first and foremost, engaging crystals and stones is a very physical link back to the body of Gaia that we can use in order to reconnect to that communication system, receive the signals our bodies need to go through this massive energy shift that we are just barely beginning, by the way. This is not the climax of the transformation. We are just beginning. And we need those signals to navigate. Otherwise, we start to see what we're seeing in the world, which is people going into stress and going into emotional and mental tailspin because they are ungrounded, they are not electrically connected to the planet, and they're unable to regulate themselves. So I think that that is the big picture, is that we have to reconnect to the planetary body as conscious cells within the being of Gaia, as opposed to unconscious rogue cells. And that allows us to do our work to carry out the commands of the consciousness that we live within, which is the Earth planet herself. So yeah, that's the big one. There are about 1 million others, but that's the big reason.
Yes, and I know for myself, when engaged within your work, the first starting point was the Primus activations and the connecting in with a heart coherence. And I think I would have done that for 6 months before I even went on to engaging with the crystals. Mm-hmm. And I found that so meaningful in terms of an approach, which I think links into what you're describing, in the sense that it took me into an approach that gave me the deepest respect for allowing myself to come into a heart coherence in order to then be in a position to resonate with the crystals. And
so that is another big piece of coming back into resonance with the earth. So the Primus activation meditation, which anybody can download for free, just go to bit.ly/Primus meditation. And you can download that, but that is a designed meditation practice to train the nervous system to operate from parasympathetic dominance instead of sympathetic dominance. Now, if people aren't familiar with anatomy and physiology, think of it as the light side and the dark side. I mean, we need the sympathetic fight or flight or freeze nervous system. We need that to survive, right? That keeps us from getting gobbled up by lions and helps us to run away from things that are scary. However, in our world right now, humans are under such constant and intense pressure to produce and perform on a constant basis that we live in that fight, flight, or freeze part of our nervous system. Every bit of energy that is perceived by the nervous system gets sent through that sympathetic fight or flight part of the nervous system. The parasympathetic part is the heal and repair, rest and digest part of the nervous system, but it's also tied into the higher parts of the brain. So what this means is that when we are living in stress physiology, when we're living in the sympathetic part of the nervous system, we're dumber. We're more easily hurted. We do not like change. We do not initiate change. That makes it very difficult to grow spiritually and consciously. In fact, it makes it nearly impossible because the sympathetic part of the nervous system is tied into those parts of the brain that are responsible for the ego. And the ego is not a bad thing. Everybody goes, oh, the ego's, terrible. I'm completely without ego. Well, no, you're not. The ego is the processing consciousness. The ego is the part of the brain that assigns meaning to things so that we can judge if we're supposed to run away or run toward it. Right? So it's a functional part of the brain. The problem is for us as spiritual people, if we try to operate, or if we are unaware and we by default operate from that part of the nervous system, all of our psychic information, all of the energy that we're receiving from other people, all of the energy that we're receiving from the earth is being processed through fight, flight, or freeze. And what this means is that you are inherently going to get a fearful, angry, or panicked interpretation of that information on a biological level. And so even our spiritual growth becomes controlled by ego and limited by ego. The parasympathetic nervous system which is that heal and repair part of the nervous system, allows our physiology and our chemistry to work together in order to kick the body into regeneration and repair. You know, there's a reason that stress is the biggest killer on the planet. It's because when we are in stress, our bodies can't heal. So the reason that this is so kind of foundational to the work that I do is that I noticed in teaching, you know, crystal resonance therapy, which is the modality of crystal healing that I developed, that many students were operating from their stress physiology, and they were putting in their effort. They had the best possible intentions, but they were hugely limited because their nervous system, which is their primary light processing system, wasn't functioning correctly. And so I wanted to find a way to help them to activate and help me to activate as well, so that I could be in that prime space, the correct part of the nervous system. So I developed the Primus meditation based on research I did in actually a lot of chiropractic texts around the nervous system, what parts of the nervous system are more related to the parasympathetic. Also just developing the idea of operating from love, you know, the idea that what you are vibrating with when you're working matters. So Primus as a meditation is not just a happy little jaunt, you know, on a conscious level into a meditation. It is training, it is weightlifting for the nervous system. And it trains dominance in the parasympathetic so that as healers and psychics and light workers, we simply have more access to light. And more importantly, we're able to interpret that energy more accurately because we're using the correct parts of the brain to interpret it, rather than the lizard parts of the brain that are involved in the sympathetic nervous system. So when people study with me, the first 6-month program, we do engage the crystals, but Primus is your daily practice 5 days a week, in addition to the interaction meditations. And that's because we have to start using those muscles. You know, the ego is just as capable of using crystals as the spiritual consciousness, but they're not going to use them in ways that are beneficial to the planet and beneficial to humanity. They're only going to use crystals that are in a way that are beneficial to themselves. And this is what we see a ton of right now, is people going, what stone's going to solve my financial problems? What stone's going to solve my relationship problems? What stones are going to solve this? You know, stones are not going to fix your problems for you. They didn't create your problems for you. What they're going to do is help you to understand how to make progress in those levels and how to use the energy in the most effective way. But if you are physiologically handicapped because you're in the wrong part of your nervous system, you're just not going to get the power and the teachings and the energy of crystals that you could get if you were in the correct part of your nervous system.
Because I found in that work, it was like a reset time, to be honest. I'm able to reset, physically, and I was then became aware of an awareness of energy as it moved through me in a way that previously I hadn't have accessed that, and I assumed that would be linked to the connection between the nervous system, the absorbing of light, but the centering in a heart coherence, which you could then go on to use in an amplifying way. And it just really struck me as a fundamental shift in approaching the crystals and working with the crystals. That singular shift, really, to kind of tune myself up before I got into an attunement with the crystals.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because it's a two-way street. You know, humans tend to think everything's all about us. I mean, we do. We think everything is all about us. And it's not. It's really not. The Earth has been here for billions of years before we showed up. It's going to be here for billions of years after we get wiped off of it. We volunteered to incarnate into the body of Gaia in order to take part in this evolution, both the evolution of human consciousness and also the evolution of planetary consciousness. And you know, it is so important for us to remember that when we are interacting with crystals and stones, it's a two-way street. We are being read by the planet. That energy that we are putting out is being disseminated across every crystal on the planet and within the planet. And the earth is learning about us, just like we would listen to parts of our body that we're feeling uncomfortable if we were feeling ill or imbalanced. The earth is listening to us. And so this kind of greedy toddler mentality of just sucking the energy out of the crystals to get rich or be more beautiful or have a great relationship is the kindergarten level of crystals. And unfortunately, it's kind of the permeating consciousness around crystals right now. But that's where we are in our development. And, you know, I've been saying for years, Lynn, as you know, it's time for crystal healing to grow up. It's time for crystal consciousness to grow up. It's no longer about being a greedy toddler, just going, you know, what crystal's gonna give me candy today. It's about taking the responsibility to be vibrating in the proper place, to be a conscious cell within the body of Gaia and participate in this two-way street. And that, I think, is a responsibility. Where you vibrate, you know, people toss around these terms like raising your frequency and vibrating at a high frequency, and yet they'll go on Facebook and post hate, post nasty political stuff, or, you know, be unthinking and unfeeling when interacting with someone else, or be dismissive and only kind of just take in what they want to take in. And that shows that operating from the fight or flight nervous system and operating from the egoic system. Don't worry about what frequency you are. Worry about where your consciousness is. You know, if you are in higher consciousness, your frequency is going to do what your frequency needs to do. Our frequencies are constantly changing, and we have many frequencies. So this idea of raise your frequency is nonsensical, because we don't have just one frequency. Where are we raising it from? Where are we raising it to? You know, we are a constantly adapting frequency system. So what determines how we adapt to changing frequency is our consciousness. So if your consciousness is not high, meaning you are not present and aware and in a place of conscious responsibility for where you're vibrating and aware of how you are impacting the world with your vibration, or your consciousness, I think, is more important than your vibration, then you're part of the problem. And I see many people, many people every day, which is one reason why I got off social media, who are spouting about high frequency, but are just plain mean or nasty or unthinking or not present or ungrounded or consumptive. You know, they just want to, everything's about me. And so this training of the nervous system is so important. We concern ourselves so much with the chakras and with the aura, but we don't recognize that the chakras and the aura are meaningless without the nervous system, because the nervous system is the interface between light and the physical plane. It's the way that we process the energy from our chakras, the way that we process the energy from our aura. So without that nervous system functioning in the proper way, your energy systems are not going to be fully hooked up. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, sorry, tangent there.
Well, no, because you're speaking in relation to the light and the nervous system being a part of the antennae, or the workings of Gaia, being within the consciousness of Gaia. So it makes perfect sense what you're saying about the nervous system being in its healthiest position to work with the light, which is often what's spoken about, the incoming light. And
right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just get excited about this because we use these terms,
yeah, we do,
but we use them incorrectly. You know, so we try to speak about frequency and, you know, all of these terms that are in essence science terms. And yet in kind of the spiritual realm, we're using different definitions for those terms than are used in science. And this is part of the reasons why we're treated like idiots, because we're using the language incorrectly, right? So when we're talking about light, we're talking about electromagnetic energy. And that includes everything from radio waves, microwaves, visible light, X-rays, and gamma radiation. It's a huge spectrum, huge spectrum. And visible light is one tiny, tiny fraction of that entire spectrum. And so when we're talking about processing light through the body, we're not talking about color. We're not talking about visible light or white light. We're talking about everything from radio waves through microwave radiation, gamma radiation, X-ray radiation. All of that is light. Radiation is light, right? So if our nervous system is not in the optimal place, number one, it's not going to have access to process a lot of that spectrum consciously. And, you know, with this evolution of the earth and the sun together right now, which is so important, I'll just briefly explain part of what's happening, which is the earth's magnetic field is weakening radically. We just actually had a release last week from atmospheric sciences that said that, you know, this weakening of the magnetic field has accelerated yet again in the past 3 years to a massive amount. We can see it on all the magnetic maps. And this is part of the pole shift, right? Which is a regular, normal shift in the Earth's magnetic field. And when magnetics weaken, you can think of it as shields going down around the Earth. And when those shields go down, all of this light and radiation come in from space. And a lot of these radiations that are coming in from space are high frequency, right? Microwave radiation is higher frequency than where we vibrate. Doesn't mean it's good for you. X-ray radiation is higher frequency than where we vibrate. Doesn't mean it's good for you. Gamma radiation sure as hell isn't good for you, right? These photons carry so much energy that they literally rip through our DNA. And so our bodies have to repair that damage from the increase in light that's coming in from cosmic sources. If our body is not in healing and repair, it can't. It can't repair that damage. And this is why we get an acceleration of cancers and we get an acceleration of these imbalances. Even just the failing of the magnetic field leading to things like increased mental illness, because our brain is part of our nervous system. And when the brain is dysregulated, it has a very hard time interpreting what's going on in a coherent, operable fashion. So the increase in light, the increase in radiation that's coming in from space is exacerbating the dysregulation from stress that we've been experiencing, you know, for the past 50 years as computers and technology came in and everything accelerated. And so when we are dysregulated, we literally are more prone to becoming ill faster, both mentally ill, you know, emotionally upset, and physically ill. And this is part of what we're seeing in the world with people losing the plot. You know, they just are going off the handle because they already were in stress. And now we have this acceleration of light coming in. So those who are on the stress path, those who have a dominant sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze nervous system are living in fight, flight, or freeze 24/7. There's no escape from it. They feel like they're losing their minds. And in some ways, physiologically, they don't have any way to get out of that hyper excited anxiety response that's created by the sympathetic nervous system with that hyperstimulation of this increased light. And then we add to that cell phones on your body 24/7, putting out microwave radiation, sitting in front of computers, working at home on your computer all day, 8 hours in front of microwave sources. You know, people talk about 5G, that's another whole conversation, but it's microwave radiation. You know, what they are not taking into consideration is that the planetary shield is failing. And it's going to continue to fail until it reaches a critical point at which the pole shift happens. I mean, we just know that from geology. It's not, this is not woo-woo, this is factual. And so as the Earth's magnetic field fails, and we know now that it fails exponentially, so it is making quantum leaps in failing rather than just a slow linear progression. More and more and more light is coming in. And as I said, this is going to be going on for the next few decades. This is not just a short period in time that we're talking about. So if we don't learn to adapt now, where's it going to go when the planetary shields are even weaker and even more of this stimulation is coming into the nervous system? If we as spiritual practitioners are not taking responsibility to cultivate and activate the parasympathetic part of the nervous system so that we can more effectively heal from the damage of the light that's coming in, and also adapt to processing that light. This is the process of evolution that we're all talking about. Then we're going to die. And that's okay too, because, death is an illusion and all that. But gee, wouldn't it be nice to succeed at this evolution this time around?
Yeah. And I guess coming back to what we were speaking about at the start, which is the idea of the crystals and ourselves being a cell within Gaia's consciousness.
Yeah.
Coming back to that then, in what you're saying about the working with the photonic light, I guess the crystal sits somewhere in there as, I don't even know what the word for it is. Does it mean we can come to a resonating level of consciousness that allows us to be more in tune with what's going on in the planet?
Absolutely. So one of the questions I get a ton is, doesn't it hurt the earth when we take the crystal out of the earth? Now we've deprived the earth of that energy of that crystal, right? And that is completely and totally wrong. You cannot deprive the earth of the energy of a crystal unless you put that crystal on a rocket and send it outside of the atmosphere, 36,000 miles into space. The reason being, crystals are electromagnetic tools. Twofold. They're electromagnetic in the sense that some crystals and stones, because we're also talking about rocks and minerals as well as crystals here, but the whole mineral kingdom, each stone either has a magnetic propensity or an electrical propensity. So if we look at like quartz, it is piezo and pyroelectric. So that means it generates an electric charge when it is either heated or rapidly heated or rapidly cooled, or when it's compressed or expanded. So it emits electric impulses. Electric and magnetic, that's electromagnetic. The magnetic piece would be, for instance, lodestone, which is ferromagnetic. It has a weak magnetic field, natural magnetic field, because of its high iron content, and it's been magnetically polarized. So when we work with lodestone, we're working with the magnetic part of the electromagnetic spectrum, or light. When we work with quartz, we're working with the electrical part of the electromagnetic spectrum of light. Our nervous system perceives both of these parts of that field. Now, the earth itself generates an electrical field and a magnetic field. Okay, so we are bathed constantly in this light body from the planet. We can't get away from it. There's no way to be separated from the planet functionally, but consciously we can be, which is important. I'll circle back to that. So the earth is putting out this light field, this electromagnetic field, and we are on the earth, right? So we're constantly bathed in this electromagnetic field. Crystals and stones within the earth are participating in that electromagnetic field of the planet, depending on whether they're electrically or magnetically attuned. And we are as well. So we actually are already inserted into this communication system.
Yes.
And, I used to call my first course the Becoming the Human Crystal course. because I call this thing, this vehicle that we insert ourselves into to come into this plane, the human crystal. And the reason for that is that it is constructed of the same things that crystals and stones are. It's all built of the same chemical elements. In the mineral kingdom, those chemical elements come together to form minerals in very pure forms. In our body, it's much more complex, but those same chemical elements come in. Those chemical elements vibrate at specific rates. So within the Earth's electromagnetic field, we're already communicating with the crystal kingdom through the vibrating chemical elements in our body, vibrating at the same rate as the chemical elements in everything else on the planet. And there is communication passing between that. Most of the time, that is an unconscious process. Most of the time, people aren't even paying any attention to this communication. We can train our nervous systems to tune into that communication and to take advantage of that communication channel through the Earth's energy field. It is fully possible in my mind, and even theoretically, that I would be able to sit here and hold a specific type of crystal. You could sit there in the UK, hold the same type of crystal, and we could communicate through that crystal because they're connected through the Earth's energy field. And we're connected through the Earth's energy field as well. So we could communicate along the same frequency chain if we were conscious enough to be able to interpret, tune into and interpret those signals, pick them out from the Earth's energy field amidst all the noise, and process them through the nervous system. And that's one of the reasons in my courses, I should say, we do immersion work with the crystals. You work with one crystal for an entire week, and you do not work with any other crystal, so that your nervous system can attune to what that crystal is carrying. You know, what is its communication channel? What is its frequency set?
I'm really feeling thrilled by what you're saying, because I know in doing the Crystal Project recently, we've done the focus and immersion into a particular 2 crystals in a given month. But it's fascinated me, and you've managed to put it so clearly into words, the process that I found going on, because it led me into all sorts of awarenesses to do with the peoples that lived on the land, to the social political sort of situations around the globe. And I thought, gosh, this is like a giant network that if we could learn to be able to, be able to sit inside of, there is information that we could share beyond physically getting to a place or whatever. It felt very real, the things that I've uncovered in that. And just as you're speaking, that's an explanation that I've never heard quite so clearly about how the crystals do communicate around the planet and for us, and have that ability to let us know, you know, what's going on really.
Yeah, and you know, part of the electromagnetic changes that are happening on the planet is what we're seeing reflected in human cultures around the planet right now as well. So these worldwide, spontaneous, kind of polarized types of experiences that we're all having around the world are not an accident. We have been used to, up to this point, relatively stable and strong magnetic field on the planet, relatively stable amounts and sources of light. We evolved in order to process those very stable types of conditions. And that stability has been decreasing, as I said, in kind of a quantum leap way for 15 years, in an accelerated way for the past 3 years, in a super accelerated way. And I think you could agree in the last 3 years, it's really hit the fan, you know, worldwide. And part of the reason for that is we are losing that stability that we are so used to. And if we are in the fight or flight part of the nervous system and we lose stability and change starts to happen, we either go into anger, or we go into panic and fear, or we go into freezing, incapability, and disassociation. And you can see those 3 main patterns playing out everywhere. The problem is people aren't conscious of it, and they're assigning the reason for it to really fleeting human conditions, when in fact it is part of this larger planetary shift. Crystals and stones are so important right now because they re-engage some level of that sense of stability. So when we are holding a stone, if you're holding a crystal, let me just pull up a fluorite here. So if you're holding a fluorite crystal, for instance, you've got, fluorine and carbon, oxygen in a very precise geometric vibrational antenna form. And you're going to hold that within 4 feet of your body. It doesn't matter where. You can stick it anywhere you want. The energy is going to go where the energy is resonant. But when you hold it in the core of your energy field, the fluorine and carbon and oxygen in your body begins to vibrate in harmony with those chemical elements within the stone. And that signature, that vibrational signature, becomes amplified because you're holding a big chunk of it in your hand, right? Or a little chunk of it. It doesn't have to be big. And that change in the amplitude of that frequency signature, in other words, it gets louder, your nervous system hears it more clearly or perceives it more clearly and transmits to the brain, ooh, we've got this shift that has happened in, light processing. And your brain starts looking through its files saying, what do I know about that frequency? What do I know about that energy? And that's why when we hold a stone, it brings up memories. It brings up emotions. It brings up thoughts and feelings, because those things are what we have stored around that frequency in our energy systems, in our nervous system. So the first use of crystals is to bring up what we have for content around that frequency so that we can clear it, heal it, that way that frequency set becomes clear, and we can then process that frequency set from the earth without any of that personal junk getting in the way, right? So we become clearer and clearer in our ability to be, I guess I would say, clear channels for the consciousness of Gaia as we go through our healing process with crystals. One of the big problems right now in the way that crystal consciousness is approached is it's not approached as crystal consciousness, it's approached as crystal slavery. So people get crystals and say, okay, come here and do this for me, fix me, or make me feel better. People only want to work with the crystals that make them feel good. The problem with that, again, is it's number one, juvenile, but number two, once crystals start bringing up your stuff, if you are addicted to crystals making you feel good, you're suddenly going to start saying, oh, that crystal has negative energy. That crystal has an entity. That crystal, whatever, is picking up bad stuff. When in fact, it's just the crystal bringing up your stuff that needs to be healed, but you don't want to look at it because you only want to feel good. And that is rampant in the crystal community at this point. And so we are seeing an increase in people who go to crystals in order to feel better, just like they would turn to pharmaceutical drugs and antidepressants to make them feel better. And then when the crystals stop making them feel better and start trying to teach them, they go in the other direction. They don't want to do it. And that is a huge sign that humans are just so stuck and so traumatized in their fight, flight, and freeze nervous system. So that really is the first thing we need to heal in order to come into right relationship with crystals as teachers instead of as energy slaves.
And do you think part of the pathway into that is to actually, as you've said, as we've done, develop a sense of kind of heart coherence to meet the crystals rather than perceiving them from the purely, I don't even know if it's an egoic state or an id state or whatever, as something to do something for us. It's about the mutual relationship, really. They all communicating as part of one network. Is that in the territory of what you're saying, really? That we can.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So the idea of heart coherence. So let's talk about that for a moment. Coherence is a state of frequency. And first of all, we have to understand that every cell in your body emits frequency, and they emit different frequencies. But the two primary emitters of frequency from the human body are the brain and the heart. And the heart is 60 times stronger electrically and 5,000 times stronger magnetically than the brain is. So your heart, your physical heart, not your heart chakra or your cardiopulmonary plexus, but your physical heart is the primary generator of your light body, of your aura. Where your heart is vibrating determines the quality of your energy. So we'll say that first. Your heart actually has its own little nervous system within it. It is so important to your light processing system. Your brain is a much weaker generator of electromagnetic energy. However, since the brain is the thinking part, it tends to believe it is the most important part. So your brain will tell you that your brain is the most important part of the body. However, you can be brain dead and continue to live. You can't be heart dead and continue to live. So we need to just take these things in their proper hierarchy. So coherence, there are two ways to think of it. The first one is that coherence is a regular pulse of energy that is measured and equal, and it's very smooth and beautiful. Incoherence is the jaggy kind of signal. So when you're watching a medical drama on television and you see the electrocardiogram on the screen and it's kind of this jaggy heartbeat, right? That's actually not a great representation of what your energy pulse is supposed to look like. Your energy pulse in an ideal state when you are operating from the parasympathetic nervous system becomes this very smooth, beautiful, equal wave, okay? Now, the second part of coherence is that when you hit that equal pulse, that coherence in frequency, your brain will start moving its signals to match those of the heart. And so your brain and heart come into coherence together as you're getting this smooth wave of energy. And that switches the parts of your brain that are dominant. It switches the parts of your brain that are processing information and processing energy. So coherence is critical. And I will say, as magnetics continue to fail, coherence becomes more and more difficult. We have to become more conscious of generating coherence. One of the things that is important with crystals and stones and has kind of been touted as the reason stones and crystals work is that crystals can somewhat affect coherence in the body. And I say that without any clear scientific evidence that that is true, because we have electrocardiograms, we have electroencephalograms that can measure these things. First of all, there's very little research being done about crystals affecting the energy field. But, and most of the reason for that is to really measure the human electromagnetic field, you need to use what's called a squid magnetometer, which are used in hospitals at sub-zero temperatures. It's incredibly expensive research to run. So, most universities are going, let's see if rose quartz really affects the, the energy field. So we don't have a lot of actual scientific research. What we have are scientific theories that can be extrapolated to possibly create theories about how crystals and stones work. So we need to understand that first. The people that are kind of touting that, chakras have been scientifically proven don't understand what a scientific proof is. So with that said, coherence can be felt more easily when you engage a crystal if you're meditating with it. And this is a big distinction. Just picking up a crystal, sticking it in your pocket does very, very little. And my big problem with that type of unconscious use of crystals and stones, which is just carrying it, just wearing it as a piece of jewelry, is it does give some background noise to your energy. It does help to support something, but you're not aware, you're not listening, you're not paying attention. And so you're not receiving the teachings, you're just using it as a prop, as a crutch on an energy level. And energy crutches can be very useful when you're in a place of dysregulation, when you're in a place where you really can't get your own energy to where it needs to go. But ultimately, what we want to be doing is consciously engaging the crystals and stones through the heart, because the heart's the largest electromagnetic oscillator. So we want to bring crystal energies into the heart and radiate them throughout the body in order to use that coherence that is generated in meditation to bring that crystal vibration to the very most minute aspects of our physical systems. So yes, heart coherence is a huge piece. And, you know, a lot of people will have been taught that the third eye is your psychic center. So they'll go pick up a crystal, stick it on their third eye and try to get information from it. The problem is if you are dysregulated, or if you are in fight or flight part of your nervous system, and you stick that crystal on your head, its electrical signature is going to exacerbate the electrical activity in your brain, which is then going to dysregulate you further. So we really need to be in a proper energy state before we bring these crystals and stones into our energy field and work with them consciously. Otherwise, there is the risk that we're going to overload the nervous system with even more light impulses than it is already processing. And again, if you're already in a state of stress or dysregulation, that's not going to be helpful. So we must meditate, and we must meditate with stones. And the Primus meditation, you know, was really just that meditation that I designed in order to create a state of heart-brain coherence, heart dominance, parasympathetic dominance, groundedness. This is huge. Being grounded is a huge part of what we need to practice. So it really fills in all of those blanks to put you in that perfect state, which I call the Primus state, because Primus means first, and it's the first state you need to be in before you do any healing, any psychic work, any work with crystals. Yeah.
Wow, wow. It's like a conversation in relation to the stones for now. It's like opens up so many doors. There's so many facets to this. And I love in your work the linking, or the bridging into a possible scientific appreciation. It's grounded in what's available to us in the knowledge of geology, biology, physics, chemistry, and to sit with it and be with it, I have found amazing. And listening to you today, I've just felt I felt the Samaya kind of, yes, you know, that leveling, that recalibrating, re-leveling, and the preparedness to grow up a little, big up a little, and see ourselves as part of, you know, Gaia's an organism on Gaia, and how to understand our systems and how they work with that, really.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if we start taking the responsibility of being a conscious cell within the body of Gaia, and engaging every other type of conscious cell within the body of Gaia, whether that be other humans, whether it be plants, herbs, you know, the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, all of them are different specialized cells within this one body that we all have incarnated into in order to bring our consciousness and the planetary consciousness through this portal that it is currently going through. And it's going to become more and more important for us to step up and take that role. The kind of, you know, gobbling toddler in the candy store kind of attitude of I'm just going to take in and it's all about me and, you know, make me beautiful, make me rich, make me happy mentality is understandable, but it is not going to work, as what we are seeing in the world, this dysregulation that is being caused by, you know, the magnetic field failing, the increased electromagnetic energy from space, the quieting of the sun into its grand solar minimum. All of these factors over the next 10, 20 years are going to exacerbate even further what we've already been experiencing. So if you're expecting all of this to stop and everything to go back to sunshine, glitter, and daisies, it's probably not going to be that way. You know, we signed up to come in order to facilitate the earth through that. That's why we're here right now, right? So we need to do our work in order to really fulfill our role that we came in to do. And if we're not doing our work and we're just consuming spiritual information or spiritual tools as a way to feel better, then, you know, that's okay. That's one way to be. But maybe we'll grow more on a spiritual level and on a conscious level if we step up, take responsibility for ourselves and say, okay, I need to be the grown-up here and be mindful of what I am doing, how I am interacting with the planet. And I don't mean just using your recycling bin. I mean, where are you vibrating? Are you vibrating from fight, flight, or freeze? Which means you're going to get triggered by every frequency of energy on the planet to exacerbate that and make you even more fearful, angry, and dissociated. Or are you vibrating from the proper part of your nervous system, healing and repair, rest and digest, that is going to open your spiritual faculties more so that you can be a functionary of this evolutionary transition that we're undergoing.
And as you were saying, this, we are beginning to undergo this. There is so much scope and potential to get further inside of this and to work this further in service to what we're here for.
Right.
With that in mind, Samaya, I was wondering if you could maybe let the viewers or the listeners to what we're speaking about now know of any further way that they can tap into your work or find out more. I know it's readily available. I know lots of people probably do know, but if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief.
Yeah, so the main way to connect with me and my work is through crystalisinstitute.com. And that's crystal with an IS at the end, institute. Crystal is institute. And I do have a crystal initiate course that's going to be launching in January that is currently opening up for enrollment. I haven't yet gotten that enrollment link on the website, but I will try to do that this week. And that's my 6-month program, my beginner's program. I shouldn't call it a beginner's program because it's not. A lot of people who've trained in crystal healing come into that program and are just like, oh my God, I never learned any of this. So it's not about being a beginner in general. It's about being a beginner with this aspect of engaging Gaia consciousness through the stones. And let's see, anything else? Well, I have my monthly reading for the Gaia organism with using my crystal ally cards on YouTube. So you can check out Samaya K. Aster on YouTube. And I think you can also look up Naisha Azian on YouTube if people are more familiar with that name. And if you sign up for my newsletter on the Crystalis Institute website, you also will get periodic subscriber-only videos that are posted that go a little bit more into depth into things. So those would be the primary ways to get on board and and kind of do the boot camp for this type of training to become a conscious cell within the body of Gaia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have really appreciated your coming forward and being with us today, because in the way that you speak, there's a sensibleness to it, there's a reality to it, there is the let's get grown up here, the way to make sense of ourselves in these present times in connection with the crystals and the stones as part of the organism of Gaia. And for that, Samaya, I'm truly, truly grateful.
Oh, thank you so much, Lynn. And again, thank you so much for having me. It's just been wonderful.